But we have with us tonight our first guest because I really want to bring Jack Ciattarelli, the 16th Legislative District, serving in, I believe, his at least third or fourth term in the legislature, potential candidate for governor of the state of New Jersey. Although, Jack, welcome to the show. And, of course, I think you know Nick Laddick and our co-host, Sue Ann. I guess the first question I would want to ask is, going into this mess that we're facing, and I don't know the last time New Jersey was in this kind of economic chaos, why would anybody want to be the governor of the state?
Well, first, Steve and gang, thanks for having me on. But I don't know. I'm one of those crazy people that thinks the crisis presents an opportunity. I see it as a real opportunity for the kind of bold and meaningful reforms that truly set us on the right path, as opposed to the traditional Band-Aid approach that Trenton takes.
Well, that Band-Aid approach, is very interesting today on the Senate budget hearing. Mr. Sutter, the new treasurer under Chris Christie, was praising the merits of the flat tax because of its consistency in revenue, that had you had a flat tax, we wouldn't be facing, this type of budget deficit. How do we deal with the tax code? What's your vision for dealing with this deficit, for getting state government under control, yet keeping taxes down, Jack? That's the big question everybody's going to be asking.
Well, one thing we need to do is resurrect New Jersey's economy, and that is never going to happen with our current tax code. I mean, I know you hear candidates, particularly Republicans, all the time talk about an overhaul of the tax code. You especially hear that at the federal level, but it couldn't be more true in New Jersey. Page after page after page of our tax code is nothing more than a disincentive, and I'm happy to rattle off a number of things in specific that we should do. As an MBA CPA, that kind of thing comes very easily to me, but quite frankly, we don't need more sales tax or income taxes right now. What we need to do first and foremost is correct the one thing that paralyzes us fiscally speaking, and that is a blatantly unfair school funding formula. Income taxes in New Jersey produce about $15 billion a year in revenue, and the way it's distributed is blatantly unfair, and it's time for us to revisit the 2008 school funding formula.
The Abbott funding decision, or one of the many Abbott funding decisions.
The last of the 40 years of Abbott funding, the last one in 2008, which was proposed by the Corzine administration. It's just, again, blatantly unfair. You can't have communities not having a skin in the game, especially communities that are experiencing revitalization and revenue growth and rateable growth. It's terribly unfair.
Well, at my last look, the last I looked, approximately 65% of the state's total income tax revenue goes to 33 towns. Those are the Abbott towns, including places like Newark, Camden, et cetera, where local taxpayers pay approximately 15% or less of the school tax burden, and our state revenue pays 85 to 90%. Is that still pretty much the case?
It is. Of the 580 school districts, you've got 30 that consume 60% of all state school aid that's made possible by the income tax. And in those 30 school districts, after you deduct the federal aid and the state aid, what's left is the local levy. And those local communities, those communities are only paying 5 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar, or 20 cents on the dollar for their schools. Whereas in the other 550 school districts, the average is about 75 to 85% is paid for by the local community through the local levy. And it's terribly unfair.
Or 90%.
Yep.
And so what the result of this is New Jersey now boasts the most expensive school districts of all 50 states. Those are the Abbott districts, and yet they are some of the most poorest performing in the country.
And listen, we all have to admit that some school districts are going to need a little more help than others. But what we have now is a terrible imbalance. You can't have places like Jersey City that are only paying 20 cents on the dollar for their schools. You cannot have an $850,000 townhouse in Jersey City paying less in property taxes than a $350,000 house in Manville, which is a middle-class town of hardworking people. It's not fair. It's not fair to ask the middle class in certain communities to subsidize the school districts in other communities that are experiencing exploding revenue growth.
Are the courts now forcing Jersey City and Elizabeth and maybe two others to do property revaluations?
Yes. But that doesn't come into play on the distribution of state aid.
Okay.
So
Doesn't have
while
anything-
that's
Okay.
a very positive development, that is not going to factor into the amount of state aid that Jersey City necessarily qualifies for, because we've kind of have grandfathered in levels of aid to places like Jersey City. So if they got $400 million in state aid before for a $600 million school budget, even when they experience revitalization in their community, we've got this kind of quirky clause that says that we can never lower their state aid. That's ridiculous. State aid was supposed to be a bridge, not a subsidy in perpetuity.
Well, actually, in 1965, when we had no income or sales tax and New Jersey was leading the nation in economic growth, they told us the state sales tax was going to cut property taxes. That was at 3%. Now it's 7%. Then in 76, they said an income tax would cut property tax and build better schools. By the way, in 1956, Newark's Waquahic High School was one of the top 10 high schools in the United States of America. In Newark. Now that school is rated at the bottom of the state of New Jersey. It's unfortunate. So we've seen the disaster of government, yet everybody continues to buy into it. And the Democrats continue to push for more of it. The Democrats continue. So is your solution, Jack, to distribute the state's income tax equally on a per-student basis?
And not necessarily on that's kind of like Mike Doherty's approach. And Mike and I Senator Mike Doherty, we want to get to the same place, but we're taking a different route. And I believe that every community has to have a skin in the game. So there's two things that are at the center of my proposal. First and foremost, no community can contribute less than 25% towards the local school budget. We can't have communities paying 5 cents or 10 cents on the dollar. No community pays less than 25% of its school budget. They have a skin in the game, and that incentivizes the local school board to maybe sharpen their pencil with the spend. The other thing is that if communities are going to be doing pilots, a payment in lieu of taxes,
Right.
75% of that has to go toward the schools. It is unfathomable to me, it's almost criminal, that communities that are almost entirely dependent on state aid to take care of their schools are negotiating pilots with developers and sending no money to the school system.
And you're talking about particularly Jersey City. This is the biggest culprit, Steve Fulop, the mayor there, who also wants to run for governor. So I'd love to see you in a debate with Steve Fulop over that issue. And it was, by the way, I will say there was also Brett Schundler who took advantage of that little loophole. And Hoboken, which is one of the highest income cities in the state of New Jersey, one of the highest income, where a rich family can send their kids to the public school system for free nursery school because we're subsidizing it, right?
Yeah. I mean, what's very interesting about Mayor Fulop is he knows that pilot strategy does not go over well with a great many of his own constituents, and he campaigned for mayor. He campaigned to get rid of the pilots, but since the time that he's become mayor, the pilots have stayed right where they were. In fact, there's more than ever. And it's not only unfair to all the other jurisdictions who subsidize the school system, it's unfair to the people in Jersey City who've lived there and worked hard for years and don't have a discount on their own property taxes.
What's the Republican Party's pathway to a majority again in the state legislature?
I think two things. The first is that we need a redo on the school funding formula. 550 school districts, 550 of our 580 are disadvantaged because of the current school funding formula. That's a message that should resonate not just in Republican communities, but Democratic communities as well. And the second thing is this realization that our current tax code is nothing more than one giant disincentive. The way to create a robust economy in New Jersey is to redo that tax code. And I'm talking about getting rid of the estate tax, the transfer inheritance tax, allow for the carry forward of capital losses. Let's not tax the gain on the sale of a first home or a second home if it's never been used for commercial purposes. And let's make the first $1 million of gain on the sale of a family-owned business tax-free. There are ways for us to restructure our taxes to accomplish those things and change the perception of New Jersey overnight.
Those are all great issues, and I like all of them, Jack. But where are you on the gas tax? And I'm sure you don't support it, but how do you propose to handle the Transportation Trust Fund?
Well, Steve, I got to tell you, buddy, that one is inevitable. I'm just not good at lying to the people of New Jersey. And I always tell people this. There's one thing we should hate more than taxes: debt. Now, what we've done since 1988 is we borrowed with the Transportation Trust Fund, and now the amount of gas tax revenues produced state does nothing other than pay the mortgage. Meanwhile, fuel efficiency standards have tripled. More people are driving natural and electrical powered cars. That increase is inevitable, but I think if we say to New Jerseyans this, three things. One, we are going to first pay down and eliminate the debt. Two, we're going to go on a pay-as-you-go basis the way many counties do. And there are counties that are tax-free they're debt-free in this state because they go on a pay-as-you-go basis for capital projects. And the third thing we're going to do is get the state controller and treasurer to do a study as to why is it a mile of road in New Jersey is 10 times more than any other state.
The most expensive in the
unacceptable.
country, the highest in the country. Well, that's because of the
Highest in the country.
unions and the workers' unions, yeah.
Yeah.
As well as EPA there's a host of regulations that have driven that through the roof. But so, Jack, I'm seeing this proposal, and it's a bill introduced by Paul Sarlo and also co-sponsored by Steve Oroho. Mm-hmm. And what it calls for is you're going to raise the gas tax, then phase out the estate tax. Now, look, first of all, they're trying to tell us that this is somehow revenue neutral. That it's revenue neutral. Why you eliminate a tax on wealthy people to put higher taxes on middle-income, hardworking Americans, and why tell me does anybody really buy that it's going to be ever phased out? Because I don't buy that. I don't buy that they'll ever phase out. Once they have that gas tax, they'll come back a year or two later and say, oh, we can't phase it out right now. We have a $1.1 billion deficit. I think that is totally bogus.
Well, listen, Steve Oroho is the only other CPA in the legislature, and I think very fondly of him. And he knows how desperately we need to get rid of the estate tax. And I think since the raising of the gas tax may be inevitable, he's trying to get something in return for it. So maybe some Republicans can support the proposal. I see the two as separate, and I would prefer to see a more complete tax overhaul rather than us tinkering here and there with pieces of a much larger puzzle.
Well, thank you for your time. And we're into our last minute, Jack. I'm going to give you the last minute, but I do just want to mention to you that we're one of the only 3 or 4 states in the whole country that even have a transportation trust fund. Maybe you should kill that off altogether and go back to traditional road funding. Anyway, I want to give you the last word on the pathway to prosperity and to becoming governor.
Well, that's something I'm giving serious consideration to. I mean, I feel very, very strongly about pointing New Jersey on a different path and doing right by the people of New Jersey. It's easier to accomplish the kind of goals that I think New Jersey desperately needs from the governor's chair than a junior assemblyman. So it's something I'm giving serious consideration to. And over the course of the next couple months, hopefully you'll see me put my name officially in the hat.
You can sign off.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Assemblyman Ciattarelli. We're going to take our first commercial break. This is 920 The Jersey. 920 The